Inside Vision is brought to you by New England College of Optometry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Inside Vision. I want to thank you all for joining us. I know I say it every week, but we have a particularly wonderful show for you this week. Some great guests who are really going to help us to better understand social media. So today our subject is social media in a time of social distancing. You know, I'm really pleased this week to be joined once again by my good friend Holly Rush. Holly, thank you for being here with us. Eric is on location, running around doing some great work out in the field, and thank you again for joining us. You were so popular last week. Everybody said, get rid of that Purcell guy. We need that Rush person back again. Welcome, Holly.
Well,
thank you so much.
I'm happy to be your partner in crime, as always, Howard.
Appreciate that. We have a great subject to cover today. You know, we've talked about marketing in the past, and as I think you noted earlier, it's probably one of our most watched shows was on marketing. And I think tonight or today is more of an extension from what we've done on that marketing show to really talk a little bit more about social media. I mean, for some, very aggressive in the social media space. For others, it's sort of this untapped opportunity that in some ways feels a little scary, makes us a little nervous. We put ourselves out there a little bit more. I know, Holly, you've had a lot of experience in industry and in other places. Have you implemented the use of social media in the business world at all? And can you give us any examples of perhaps how that's been beneficial to you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think probably the most recent example of my time at Costa is the most relevant for the conversation today. And it had a lot to do with identifying strategies to tell our brand story. And I think that's a lot of what the conversation is going to be about today as well, is defining your brand as a practice service, and social media vehicle is the most relevant to reach your customer base or your patient base. And it's not a one size fits all. I think what we found at Costa is that we had a very strong following on Facebook early on, and that was indicative of one type of consumer we had. But where we really needed to invest in content development, which is very different than Facebook, was Instagram, because that was a different consumer type that we were looking to expand as an audience. So, you learn a lot as you go, and what you realize is that sometimes it's just about taking those first few steps and getting started.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I think no better group of people to help us take those steps and get things started than the three guests we have. So I think, Holly, if you're okay, without further ado, let's bring our guests on to join us.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So today we have three amazing guests with us, and I'm just going to briefly introduce them. I think they're pretty well known by our audience. These are three people who've really made a very significant impact in social media and a significant impact on the profession of optometry, a pretty good juggling act. But we're really thrilled to have these three with us. So very quickly, and I won't do your backgrounds justice, but we'll just briefly introduce our guest, Dr. Jennifer Tsai. Jen, thank you so much for joining us. Many of you know Jen from Jenn and Juice out there with her Instagram. She's got, I was saying earlier, I was celebrating that I'm almost hit 1,000 followers on Instagram, feeling pretty good about myself until I got to know Jen, and she's out there with 150,000 followers. Jen, welcome to Inside Vision. Very happy to have you here today. Along with Jen, we've got Dr. You bet. Thank you. We've got Alan Glazer with us. Dr. Glazer is well known by most of us in the profession through ODs on Facebook, but really has made his mark across optometry in so many different ways. Alan, I will say, is an alum of New England College of Optometry as well. Love to have our alums joining us, and also a member of our board of trustees. So Alan, welcome. Very happy to have you here. What some people may not know about Alan, he's also an inventor, an author. I don't know how he does all the things that he does, but we appreciate all the things he does. And the fact that he's created this amazing platform that we have in optometry to engage with each other is really something pretty special. So Alan, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Thank you, Howard.
And then, you bet, buddy. And then last but not least, my good friend, Dr. Justin Bazan. Justin, welcome to the show. Justin, for me, is the guy who really got things started in optometry to a large extent. He's really the person who kind of put it on the map for many people, sort of the pioneer of social media in our practices. A couple funny stories about Justin. I'm embarrassed you a little bit, buddy. I remember going to one of Justin's lectures. It may have been one of the early lectures he gave. Room's packed with 600, 700 people. And Justin gets up there and tells us all, throw away your telephones. You don't need those things anymore. Social media is the best way to engage with your patients. And we all just, I think there was a hush over the room, like, what planet did this guy just land from? Yet, Justin, you were really so far ahead of what was going on. You taught us all so much about how to use social media. And you know what? Now we're at a very interesting time in our profession. The good news is we're seeing so many returning back to practice. We're optimistic about the future and what's going on. And I'm going to toss it over to Holly, but I think what we'd all like to know is, how are you guys recommending, or how do we utilize this great vehicle that you all have mastered? So Holly, I'm going to throw it over to you. I know you've got some good questions for our guests.
Yeah, I think it would be fantastic just to learn from each of you how important social media is to your marketing strategy and building out your practice and your position, and why you chose social media as a vehicle as early on as you did. And I know the communities that we're talking about here are a little bit different. We have maybe consumers and patients, and then trade and industry. But I think really interesting conversation about how you got involved and why you got involved with social media as a key marketing strategy. So Justin, I don't know if you want to jump in first. You're at the top of our screen.
That's an easy one for me. I opened my practice cold in 2008 and pretty much did it on a shoestring budget. And I didn't have any money in the budget for marketing, and I just went back to what I knew. And what I knew from working in a retail-based setting where I developed a patient blog, a patient information blog, and having a large personal network on social media, I said, hey, how come nobody's doing this for the practice? Why can't my practice have a persona? Why can't my practice be put on social media? Why can't I leverage the same things that I've been doing just in a larger way to help drive my business? So patient acquisition and the maintaining of relationships with existing patients. From a very early standpoint on was one of the key reasons that we got out in front of this. And that's actually one of the reasons that Howard saw me in front of that audience, is because we got out there first. And we hopefully continue to stay ahead and lead the way in that. But there's a whole new crop of social media optometric all-stars that are coming up that are taking it to new levels I never even thought of.
Well, what a great lead-in for Jenn to talk about her 150,000 followers and her following on Instagram. So Jenn, you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started and how important it is for your business as well?
Sure. Initially I started it 2 years ago, and at that time it was more to show that you can be multidimensional as a optometrist. I think a lot of doctors especially feel a little uncomfortable sharing their personal life. But I found that it makes you very relatable to patients. And so I recognized the value pretty early on building more of a personal brand. I noticed that a lot of dermatologists did it, a lot of dentists did. And I figured, why wouldn't an optometrist do that as well? And I think it really does establish your values and your passions, and it defines your style, and it makes you unique and stand out. I think as humans, we are pretty much drawn to authenticity and finding ways to connect with both our patients and consumers. And that way they can really believe in the products and your services as well. And I think that it really is like a digital resume these days. Back then we would turn in our resumes and you would find doctors through maybe like insurance plans, but these days patients can find you on Dr. Google search for 30 seconds and basically find out everything about you in that one search and decide if they want to come to you or not. So.
Hey, Holly, can I jump in just for a second? I'm just curious to ask Jenn, if I can, how the heck do you get 150,000 followers, Jenn?
Hard work. It really I think it's a lot of just posting related things, and it doesn't necessarily have to always be about optometry. I'm willing to share my good days and my bad days, and I think because of that, people do find comfort in it, and they find that it is relatable both as colleagues and as patients. So I think that's really helped a lot.
Yeah, I guess
being Howard authentic, is looking for some personal advice. Right, maybe Howard, a few pictures of your dogs might help, right?
Very true.
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah. Hey, what do you have to lose? Give it a try. Jenn
Howard,
can help, I'm sure.
If we were to follow you, and I do follow you, why don't we hear your social media handle? We need to plug that. You've got all these viewers tuned in right now.
Thank you, Dr. Bazan. So Neko Prez with a Z, just in case anybody's interested. Maybe I can try to catch up to Jenn one of these days.
If you offer a free enrollment into NECO, I'm pretty sure you'll get a lot of followers.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
there you go. We wanted tips.
I think it's time for Dr. Glazer to answer your question.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Howard, and thanks everyone. Justin, let's talk about revisionist history here. First, come on. Justin and I battled early in the days of social media. I got into social media. Actually, I started with search optimization, and when I found out how much it could benefit my practice in the late 90s. And at that time, there was no social media. But as Google's search engine evolved, and they found out different ways to elevate people for the phrases and keywords they wanted to be found for business, they started incorporating social cues in 2003 or 4. And when I found out about this, I started getting involved in the early social media like MySpace and things like that, chat rooms and things like that, where you could type in those keywords and it would give you this juice. So my involvement in social media was a natural extension of my desire to drive patients into the chair. And Facebook came around, and then that kind of wrote my story. But it was the intersection of search and social media that got me involved.
Perfect. So I'm curious. I know we want to talk about social media and its importance, and at a time like COVID-19, and how you guys have utilized it to communicate and engage your followers. But I'm also really curious, before we do that, about platform selection. Right. So, there's Instagram, there's YouTube, there's Facebook, there's our president's favorite Twitter. There are a ton of different options. And if you're not already engaged actively on a platform, how do you make the right choice? So Jenn, maybe you can start that one. How do you choose which platform is right for your brand and also for your messaging?
I think it is possible to really excel in any platform that you choose. You just have to choose something that fits your persona. So if you enjoy speaking a lot, but you don't care so much of putting together sort of a poised photo or a video, I think a podcast is great. Great things about podcasts is you can actually learn from others as well, and it becomes more of a conversation. If you are interested in more of sharing short captions, Instagram is great for that, and sharing as well your products in specific frames that you might have in your store. And then there's also TikTok, which is the new sensation. I think if you're trying to make more fun, silly, educational, short formats, that's great to really find people, and it's targeted towards the younger generation. And then you also have YouTube and Facebook as well, which is more for, I guess, longer content that's more informative, that stays on the internet for a little bit longer, but it definitely takes a lot more work to create a YouTube video.
Perfect. Justin and Alan, you guys also made decisions very early on to focus on, certain social media platforms. It doesn't mean that you don't have a presence elsewhere, but there's one that's prominent. So maybe Dr. Glazer, you want to talk about Facebook or what's important to you there?
Sure. I'm more of the Facebook generation. I've got a few years on both of these docs. And it really was, when I came up in social media, it really was the only place to post. Justin, to a degree also, I would say. I was slow to adapt to Instagram because I was more used, like you said, Holly, to very, in a very smart way, like the conversational side was what I wanted, but it was a typed word, whereas podcasting wasn't really prominent then. So Facebook is where I kind of made my bones, and then moving over to some other, content creation was a big part of my effort too, because of the keyword and Google finding the keywords and everything like that. So I would say Facebook for me, and I've moved over to Instagram lately, but I'm still not that passionate about it.
Got it. Yeah, my kids remind me every day that Facebook is so uncool. But that's okay. We can be uncool together, right?
If you try starting to impress your kids,
So
sorry.
That's a great
Can
point.
I throw that in? If you try starting to impress your kids, whoops, we're going over each other. If you try starting to impress your kids on social media, you're immediately a dork as a father. I'll tell you that from experience.
Well, certified, no question. Justin, you had some things to add.
Yeah, but one of the things we got to consider is, are these kids booking their own appointments to come see you as an optometrist? Like, who do we want to market to? who is the audience of that social media platform? Is it the kids we want to market to? Then be on TikTok all day. Or is it the parents? Who makes the decisions for the healthcare and the family? So we use Facebook. We use Facebook advertising platform. We create ads that are generated specifically towards the mamas, and we market towards them. So we try to pull them in directly with our content on Facebook. Nowadays, those moms are shifting younger. So we're seeing, 35-year-olds be a target, and they're on Instagram. So we use Facebook's leverage on Instagram and Facebook's ad platform, which ties into Instagram, so we can hit both of those major platforms with one ad campaign. And we found tremendous success in doing that. So it's the combination of both Facebook and Instagram, because they are owned by the same parent company now.
Justin, I think it's interesting, a point that you just made that I think is a really important one. We were kidding earlier about social media platforms that we're comfortable with. Like, maybe perhaps my generation, a little more comfortable with Facebook, maybe younger generations, it moves. And Jenn mentioned TikTok. But your point, I think, is such a critical one, which is the platforms should be the audience we're going after, not necessarily our comfort level of where we feel good. That's such a key point. And I think in utilizing a vehicle like this, successfully, we really have to understand the customer, the patient, who we're going after. And I think for you, you've obviously done it extremely successfully. I'm curious, though, do you have a phone in your office today?
No phone. No,
pretty amazing.
We haven't had a phone since 2012-ish, around there.
And because of your engagement through social media, through other vehicles where patients can reach you, it hasn't slowed you down a bit, apparently.
Hasn't. So when we pulled the phone, we said, why are people calling us? And we did a 3-month kind of study to see what they were doing when they were on the phone with us. 1, they wanted to make an appointment. 2, they wanted to get just basic, FAQ info, like, where are you located? What are your hours? 3, they wanted to know if their stuff was ready. So we put an online scheduler up. We utilized email and text. And that was a decade ago, and haven't looked back ever since. So it's also helped us make sure our office is running efficiently with a very tight-knit crew, and having somebody, give you one of these when you walk in because they're on the phone doesn't exist in my office. So we improved the customer service, the patient experience aspect of it, and also became very lean in the office as well too. And in this day and age, where we're looking at reduced capacity for an indefinite period, I think that the conservation of payroll is key, and utilizing some of these tools can quite potentially help eliminate an unnecessary position.
It's great, and you've already really started to answer the question, but I'll throw it right back at you since you've started it, which is, how have things changed in this time of a pandemic? How are you using social media differently, or are you using it any differently? And I think you've started to answer. Maybe you could just give us a broader view of what's different today versus a couple months ago.
Well, what's the definition of social media, right? Human beings are social creatures. We hopefully care about each other. We form communities, we share experiences. We want to be in somebody else's business. But that's the social aspect. Media is just the way, the platform that it gets out there. And we do that through our various social media platforms. But playing into that humanistic nature, though, people want to feel safe. So if they're coming back to your office, if they're breaking their stay-at-home orders to come see you for whatever reason, they need to know that your office is a safe haven. So getting the message out about the additional precautions or steps that you've been doing to make people feel like it's an office that they can come to and not have to worry about COVID is something that I put as the utmost and primary directive for social media use for right now. So, we're all out there trying to get our offices in tip-top shape to make sure that the transmission of this virus is suppressed as possible as we can. And those efforts need to be put out there. And we didn't mention the kind of the more traditional social media platform, which is just a newsletter, right? Having a one-on maybe a few conversations in that office when you broadcast the newsletter out and put your social media links in there has also been a powerful tool. We have re-announced that we were fully open for eye care, and within an hour and a half, I had 38 appointments booked through that newsletter blast. So don't forget about some of the more traditional digital marketing as a nice tie into your social.
That's great. And, so communication and education has always been a key part of what social media is about. But I think your point is one that's well taken. probably no more critical than today in terms of making sure we are communicating, making sure we are educating, because we can all open up our offices and think we're ready to go. If patients aren't feeling safe and don't know we're taking the appropriate precautions, I mean, put yourself in that same situation. You wouldn't feel comfortable going in either. So excellent. I think, for me, social media in a time of social distancing, it almost, it isn't even really social distancing, right? It's physical distancing. We don't want to social distance, and social media is a great way to keep that engagement going on in a platform that's obviously very well proven and that is effective in doing that. So, Alan, for you on ODs on Facebook, have you changed anything? Has anything changed at all, both in that platform and in your own practice during these past couple months?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has changed. I describe it as we're really seeing a crack in the fabric of social media during this difficult time. I can't think of another a time as difficult as this since social media has been in existence. I mean, 9/11, of course, it wasn't really an issue, but there's a lot of noise and confusion. There's chaos. There's chaos of information is a word that I like to use. You're getting bad information, you're getting good information, and you're getting a lot of misinformation. So it's really showed its weakness. So in ODs on Facebook, I've had to put some new policies in place to try and keep the conversation elevated, keep a lot of the speculative stuff out, or at least identify it when it's speculative. It's the same thing Facebook's doing. They're kind of doing the same thing. Twitter just announced the other day putting a hashtag on things that are more truthful than others. And so in that sense, yes, for ODs on Facebook. For my practice, not so much. Everything that Justin said was so spot on, and that's why he is who he is in the industry. On top of that, one of the things that I've always paid attention to is how our message is that we want our patients to have. If they're seeing from other competing businesses again and again and again, day in, day out, where many of us only reach out to those patients once a year with a recall, or maybe if the ones of us who are really on top of things send out a quarterly newsletter. But they're seeing messages for new glasses, spare glasses, sunglasses all the time. So we're out of sight, out of mind. And in the practice, what we try and do is stay in front of them using certain types of ads, using customer communication software, which I totally agree with Justin. It's a very, very important thing to use more regularly than we do. So during this time, what we've done is really buckled down and kind of rebuilding our marketing strategy. And for the people out there who always have talked about having a marketing strategy, you have the time now. So I strongly recommend you put together something and implement it during this time, as well as create some content.
Good stuff, Alan. Thank you. One just quick follow-up for you. So if I'm somebody who hasn't really engaged a lot with social media, what sort of resources do I need? Because, throwing something up there once in a rare while, I've heard from all of you guys and been educated by all of you, not a good idea. At the same time, there's some balance to create. So any recommendations, Alan, that you would have for listeners to say, okay, I've tested the waters a little bit, but I'm buying what you guys are saying. I believe it's the right time to get more engaged. What sort of resources do I need? Is it significant, or can I make it work in a small practice?
Well, for everyone that's listening to this talk, we're all experts in eye care. We can sit down and create a blog, which is typically 2 to 3 small paragraphs on any subject. Like, what is astigmatism? You could sit down and do that without having to reference anything. And your knowledge is going to be the knowledge that needs to be out there. It's very important to understand that you have it inside of you. When I was blogging, I had a blog for the practice. I wrote 700 blog posts, and the problem was never writing the post. After a while, it was coming up with a new topic. But once I had the topic, it was something that I could just spit out because I was living it professionally. So the content exists within you. Coming up with a different angle on what the title is or what it's going to be is usually the biggest challenge. So I wouldn't say you need many references at all. Write from your heart. Like Justin said, write things that are meaningful, and you will have a better following. You'll be trusted. Like Jenn said, she shares the real Jenn. Share the real you. Talk about some feelings and emotions, and don't hide behind the pen, as a lot of authors have said, and you'll do really well. It's really just another medium for expressing yourself.
And Alan, do you have someone in the practice who has responsibility for social media?
Well, yes. Now I do. Up until the time I sold my practice about 2.5 years ago to private equity, and up until that time, I was doing most of the content creating. During at times I go around to the staff and I ask them to come up with ideas. But I like to write it myself because it reflected my business and my brand. I've never had anybody else write it for me, though.
Yeah, Howard, I was just observing one of the themes in all this, which is there's lots of different ways you can go, and that in and of itself can be overwhelming, especially if you're not engaging. Either A, you haven't maybe created a powerful marketing strategy yet, or you haven't really utilized social media to develop out your business or your brand. So it sounds to me, based on what our guests are saying today, that defining the objective, the reason why you want to use social media is critically important. Is it an educational tool? Is it building medical expertise in the community? Is it telling the story of your practice or your own persona? So defining that first sounds like it's critical. And then if you are going to use it for marketing practice, it's also about getting your brand, right? So show up and what your content should look like. That's what I'm hearing across all of our speakers today, regardless of how they're using social media. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would agree.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Alan here, if I can add something to that. When I in 2010, I wrote a book about how I was using social media to boost myself in search. It was called Searchal Marketing. I wouldn't recommend anybody buy it now. It was from 2010. But I'm not plugging the book, but in it I have what I call Glazer's rule. And Glazer's rule, I've always wanted a rule, so I was very glad to write a rule. And the rule says that you can never create too much content as long as the content you're creating and sharing has more value to the end user than yourself. So once you reference your brilliant brain, Howard, and all that knowledge from all those years in academia and corporate America and as an OD, and you're writing, just make sure your target is driving value to the people who are in your feed, and it will succeed.
Good stuff, my friend. Good stuff. So, Jen, we're ready to hear the PSI rule or something of that nature. But anyway, can you tell us a little bit, the question we were asking before, just anything that you've changed that you're doing different over these past couple of months? And then if you care to add to anything about what Holly was saying about how these are kind of the key pillars around how you build it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Justin and Alan both hit the nail on the head. Social media really hasn't been any different. Nothing's changed in terms of its technology. But definitely with quarantine and everything else going on, the way we've been using it is a little different. You have everyone's undivided attention right now. So providing them with free information exchange for their attention is very valuable. And it's a free tool for you to use. I would say that a lot of people have a hard time figuring out how to reach the right demographic, because ultimately that's what you're using it for. You want to make sure that you understand the purpose of it and you're using it the right way. So I noticed that a lot of practitioners have a hard time targeting maybe their clientele. And part of the problem is it's hard for our optometrists to post maybe like before and after photos of someone's vision getting better, right? Whereas in dentistry or plastic surgery, you can see someone's work before and after. Not so much the case in optometry. So I think showing it in a different way with both either like videos or captions, and showing it in captivating ways where you're using it to educate or entertain is very useful. And I think just finding your niche and mastering your specific craft and being consistent. I always, when I do talks at school, sometimes I talk about the 3 important E's, which is to educate, empower, or entertain. And I think that primarily people follow a lot of pages for those reasons. Like if you follow education social media channels, it's either the CDC or CNN currently to follow with COVID. If you follow empowering leaders like Michelle Obama, and in terms of like entertainment, I know everyone follows at least some pet page on here or someone funny like King Bach or Ellen DeGeneres. So it's just generally really trying to appeal to those 3 things. And I think it's able to help you become successful that way because people do connect with the human behind the brand.
Jen, have you engaged in discussions or in any type of presentation about the COVID issue, or have you kind of stuck with what you do? People come to you to get that relief and that break, or have you really had to acknowledge it through social media?
I try to stay within my place, and I think I I just want to touch on it lightly. I think a lot of healthcare professionals, since a lot of light has been shed on healthcare professionals as frontline heroes, sometimes people can take that power to their advantage and use it in ways where maybe it's not within your specialty. You're sharing information, and I just try to stay within optometry and eye care. So some of the things I have shared is things that I would implement in the office, things like telehealth that I'm currently doing, and a lot of tips related to like, if you're wearing face masks now, how do you prevent fogging on your glasses? Doing little videos like that, or talking about how to clean your glasses properly when you're at home to disinfect it. So I do talk about COVID, but I try to keep it within eye care since that is what I specialize in. If you try to do too much, I think sometimes it dilutes your message a little bit.
Yeah, Holly, I think that makes a lot of sense. You have to find that good balance somewhere between, we can't turn on the TV today without hearing something about what's going on with the pandemic, and rightly so. But we also need a little break, and it seems to me that social media can at times be a little bit about that break from it to continue to engage in the things we like to do. And I think Jen's comment is a powerful one for sure.
Yeah, and I think someone mentioned earlier too, Howard, I think it was you, that you used the word balance. And I think that's the element of social media is finding the right balance between Jen's 3 E's, for example. And in a time of crisis or of change like COVID, you have to find the right balance between critical information that helps your employees feel safe in practice, and maybe lightening that up or reverting back to your brand and your business purpose as well, so that there is a balance. It's not all serious. It's not all, let's say, somewhat scary. It can all be well-rounded in the messaging. And I think that's a lot of what our guests today are talking about as well, is balancing that messaging.
Pretty important, absolutely. And so speaking of that, maybe perhaps I think you and I have probably made a mistake or two along the way somewhere as it related to our social media. And perhaps our experts could share maybe, sort of mistakes to avoid. They don't have to admit these were their own necessarily, but they know people who've made these types of mistakes. So Justin, we're gonna let you take the first swing at that. Advice for our listeners, our viewers on mistakes to avoid. Social media, it's easy to make mistakes, and unfortunately, sometimes pretty tough to take them back.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that will kill momentum is just disappearing from your social media platform. I mean, I've had periods where there's been several days up to a couple weeks where I'm MIA, but sometimes people will create, for example, a Facebook page or an Instagram profile and get off to a very quick start. And they're doing great, and they're building momentum. They may even be at 900 followers, and then all of a sudden it just crickets, right? And that kills it. And it's really almost impossible to get that same social media handle back started again. It's almost you have to start fresh if it crashes that hard. So I'd say just, it's not just about showing up, it's about showing up consistency.
Good stuff. Jenn, anything to add to that? Mistakes to avoid?
I completely agree with Justin. I have another rule, I guess. It's just the 1% rule. I shared it before, but it's small changes can lead to significant gains over time if you focus on becoming 1% better each time. And that just relates to being consistent. Just like anything you want to become better on, if you go to the gym, you don't end up looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger the next day. It takes a lot of years and a lot of work. And just like going through optometry school, it's a lot of time that you spent focusing on that to eventually gain the knowledge to become that 1% better each time. So in terms of social media, it surprisingly or not, it works the same way. It takes a lot of time and a lot of your energy focused on it to grow it. And the other tip I would say is just to not focus on what success looks like for other people, because everyone's path is different. Something that I might post in the way I do it in terms of my style may not be the same that would work for you. So instead of copying others, just try to be yourself first, because I think that people can tell if you aren't being authentic. But in terms of seeing what other people do and finding them inspirational, it's totally great. But just take what you learn from that and make it your own. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, Alan, anything to add to great suggestions by Justin and Jenn?
Yeah, they were both great. And Jenn, what Jenn said is, if you're not social in real life, just to add that, if you're not social in real life, either come up with a different persona or don't post, because it could come off just as awkward as in real life for you. Everything, the biggest lesson, I would say, the number one lesson that I've been okay with. I haven't had any major problems with it, but I'm sure somewhere is that everything you post is permanent. It's up there for good and it's findable. So keep that in mind when you're representing your business. You're trying to build your brand. Try to keep your business social media and your personal social media separate for that reason. And always when you're writing for the benefit of business, always be sure to include words and phrases about the products and services that you hope to be found for, because if you use those, then it will help give you that juice for SEO. But really, just be careful what you write. It's up there for good.
Yeah, and I would just add, I would add one other from a brand building standpoint. I'm going to go back to my experience at Costa. Be careful with the hard left or hard right, and what I mean by that is that it really is visible to the world what you do on social media. So as your business strategy and your brand evolves, make sure you're clear on where you're going and evolve that messaging on social media, because it is real time. As Dr. Glazer said, it's up there forever, and it can potentially alienate your existing patients or consumers if you make a hard left or a hard right. So I think those are just things to keep in mind, is know where you want to go and start evolving it. As Jen said, 1% better each time, one day at a time. But be careful of making a sharp bend in the road left or right, because it is very visible to all of your followers.
Wow, really good suggestion. So here's what we're going to do, guys. First of all, a ton of great information. Thank you so much. As we start to wind down, I'm going to hit you with a couple rapid fire questions, which means rapid fire answers. Okay, we're going to give this one a shot. Because I love you guys, and I'd love to do another hour with you, to be honest. But I want to make sure that that we're mindful of everybody's time as well. So with that, we're going to start with Jen. Jen, a couple quick rapid fire questions. Future of telehealth. How do you see future of telehealth playing out over the next year to 18 months?
One word would be integrated. It's going to be part of the model, whether we like it or not, in some form. I think that it can be useful for things like contact lens follow-ups and things where they don't need to come into the office. But if we don't adhere or sort of integrate technology into our practice, we may fall behind. So I would definitely say that it's going to be part of the future.
Very good. Justin?
Time to get paid. Time to get paid. We've been getting pictures of my eye and answering things through email, and now we're able to do that with some compensation. So my new favorite line is, wow, that lends itself perfectly for a telemed visit. And then we go through that and we make sure that we're doing a video chat and we're taking care of the problems, and a lot of times that works. Some of the times we bring them into the office, but actually getting paid for the time spent is now a part of it, and I like it a lot.
Good stuff. You deserve to be paid for your time spent. Do you see it continuing on even past, let's say, we have a vaccine, we're good, we're not thinking COVID anymore? Do you see telehealth continuing?
Absolutely, and I think that you're going to see the expansion of services in new ways. For example, Walt Mayo from SECO came up with an online acuity chart that now allows me to watch people do visual acuities. And I'm like, hey, we can do DMV testing now. DMV's closed from the pandemic, but I can actually do this online now. So it's expanding services and finding new creative ways to solve people's problems.
Good stuff. Thank you, sir. Dr. Glazer, telehealth.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to watch it right now. There's a reverse curve where the more you're able to see someone in clinic, the less there will be a role for telehealth presently and in the near future. But as the technologies evolve, I look forward to a future where it's really important. And I think the most important thing is that optometry owns it and regulates it and doesn't poo-poo it and say goodbye to it, because somebody else will pick it up then and they will exclude us. So it's very important to keep an eye on it. And the future of it is very positive.
Yeah, Holly and I have had this discussion before, and it just seems that it's such a great tool, such a great resource, but yet there's still work to do, right? We still have validation to do. We still have some work to do, but optometry needs a seat at the table. And I think, to me, that's a key element of this. We can't just continue to say, this isn't good, you got to come to the office, particularly during a time like now, but even before and after. Our profession needs to have a seat at the table and be engaged in this. At least that's my opinion. It sounds like you guys too. Okay, one more quick rapid fire, and and then we're going to have to wind it down here. But recommendations for readings or references. All of our guests like to provide those. Our listeners, our viewers have enjoyed that. So, Justin, we'll start with you. Anything you're reading right now, or any reference materials particularly around the subject area we're talking about, but in general that you think could be helpful for people?
Follow Jenn. In all seriousness, though, the ability, so we all learn differently, and you know that as being the president of the school there. I learned by imitating, mimicking. You know, I tried to copy what Alan was doing. That didn't work clearly. I'm not going to start doing what Jenn's doing, but there are people out there that you have in your feed that you see, that you respect, that it resonates, something resonates with you, and you can start to evolve your post to kind of mimic that and test the waters and see what works until you find your true voice, your true passion, your true persona, and your true marketing messages. But just being part of social media, you learn so much. So just start adding people to your feed that you want to learn from, and you will definitely learn.
Good stuff. Dr. Glazer, anything you're reading right now or references that you could provide that you think would be good for our listeners?
Sure. So to me, the quintessential and most basic book was written by this guy named Henry Jenkins. It's called Spreadable Media. And it talks about how a message in social media is a tree in the forest until you're able to spread it and other people can see it. So if you're doing things and it's not getting looked at, it's like a tree in the forest. It's doing you no good. And he talks about the importance of that even before social media. It was important when in the days of newspapers and things like that. So the other thing I like to read about is content marketing. And this guy named Joe Palazzi has a great book called Epic Content Marketing. It talks about messaging and reducing confusion around your brand. And then the other books I like are branding books. Chris Brogan wrote Trust Agents. Fantastic book about branding and building your brand's influence. And then this guy named Clancy wrote a book called Smarter, Faster, Louder. I read not too long ago, which I liked a lot.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, sir. Jenn, any suggestions?
Well, since Justin said follow me, so my suggestion is to follow Howard on Instagram.
Hey, by the way, I am much closer to 1,000 than I was a half an hour ago. So thank you all very much.
Well, I guess in terms of currently things that I'm reading, it may not be so much related to social media, but I am trying the course out from Yale. One of the professors is doing a happiness curriculum, which, it sounds silly, but I think learning and understanding that really helps you become an overall better person. And when you're an overall better person, you can be a better practitioner and maybe a better influencer on social media. But I also listen to podcasts by Gary Vee. People I think love him or hate him. I think there are two books that people have read. I haven't personally read them. I think Psychology of Persuasion and Building a Brand Story, if people are looking for books related to social media.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Holly, we got a lot of great information today from these experts. But I love what Jenn mentioned at the end here, and that's the mental health side. I think it's something we probably don't talk about enough, but being in the issues and dealing with the issues that we're all having to deal with today, I think it is important to spend a little time on yourself as well and make sure you're focusing on things that make you happy, that let you exercise, do the things that are critically important. But I know I'm a lot smarter today now, thanks to these guys, when it comes to social media. I appreciate it very much. On behalf of Holly and I want to thank Dr. Bazan, Dr. Glazer, Dr. Sai. Keep on doing the great stuff that you guys are doing. We're learning every day from you all, and it's so critically important to our future, particularly at a time like this. So, Holly, before we close it out, I didn't know if you wanted to make any final comments. It's all yours. If you'd like.
Very exciting show today, and I love the consistency and the differences in how our guests today are using social media and thinking about their brands and thinking about connecting with their patients and consumers. So I found it fascinating. I'm sure that your listeners will as well, and some great resources as well to get started. So fantastic show, and thanks for doing what you're doing, Howard, to keep everybody connected and informed.
It's very nice, Holly. Thank you for joining me. You're getting to be a regular here, and I hope that will continue, but appreciate your time as well. So thank you, everyone, for joining. We're going to end like we do every week with something to think about.
Thanks, guys. As you begin your journey in welcoming patients back to your practice, there's a number of different things that you need to do. Just like while you're in quarantine, having a successful communication campaign with your patients to let people know what's going on with your practice is probably one of the most important things you have on your list. Using social media, it gives you an unprecedented number of platforms that you can reach out to your community and your patients. However, just like any external marketing or communications program, you have to make sure that you understand what can happen if you don't plan well. First of all, what does an external communication plan do? It's to drive people to your office via email, telephone, to your website. So there's some very important things that you need to do to make sure that this campaign is successful. Number one, make sure that your messages have clear goals and are targeted messages in what you want to say. Make sure that your internal team is very well prepared to handle the questions or inquiries that come in from your campaign as well. Please make sure that you execute it to perfection. Make sure you live up to what you said in those social media posts, because one thing about social media, unlike other communication campaigns that you've done in the past, is the effect can be very immediate and impactful to your practice, both on the good side and on the bad side. So if you plan well, having a social media plan can really help you pave the path back to restoration of your practice. But if you don't do that well, it can derail it just as quickly. I'm John Rimpakis, and that's something to think about.
Thanks for watching Inside Vision. To receive updates about our programming, click subscribe.